My wife went to a client dinner. My business partner, Richard Dalton, pulled her into a private room and assaulted her. I was right next door. I heard her screaming my name. I never opened that door. She called the cops. At the trial, I took the stand and said it was consensual. I told the court she took off her own dress and climbed onto his lap. The judge ruled on the spot, not enough evidence. Richard walked. My wife threw her steel tumbler at my head. Jack Collins, I want a divorce. You're a monster. Everyone said I was scum, a coward, trash. Nobody knew I'd been waiting 3 months for this exact day. Jack, get back here. Isabel's voice followed me down the courthouse hall. I didn't turn around. Blood was running from my eyebrow down my cheek. She'd swung that tumbler hard enough to split the skin open. Stop. She grabbed my arm and spun me around. Mascara was everywhere. Her eyes were swollen, almost shut. How could you lie for him? I looked at her. I said nothing. I'm your wife. He raped me. You were right outside. You heard me. Why didn't you come in? She pounded on my chest. Over and over, not hard, but fast, frantic. Tell me why. I caught her wrists and pulled her hands off my collar. Stop making a scene. 4 words. He seemed to drain everything out of her. She stumbled back a step. Stop making a scene. She laughed. It was an awful sound. You're telling me to stop making a scene? He had me pinned against a table. My dress was torn open. You were standing right outside. I screamed your name 17 times. Jack, 17. And you didn't make a sound. And now you want me to stop making a scene? I looked past her shoulder. Her family was coming down the hall. Her father, Robert, her mother, Martha, her cousin, Jessica, and Jessica's husband, Todd. I wiped the blood off my jaw and turned to leave. Isabel threw herself at my back and locked her arms around my waist. You're not leaving until you tell me the truth. I already did. My voice was flat. Everything I said on that stand was a fact. Her arms went limp. Jack. Her tone changed. It wasn't a question anymore. It was hate. The biggest mistake of my life was marrying you. I'm divorcing you. Okay. I stepped toward the exit. Robert's slap came faster than I expected. Crack. My head snapped sideways. You son of a bitch. He was shaking. I gave you my daughter. This is how you protect her. I kept my hands at my sides. Robert, don't say my name. He backhanded me again. You don't get to. Martha pushed to the front and spat in my face. You're not a man. A grown man stands outside a door and listens to his wife get torn apart. Are you useless, or were you in on it? I wiped my face with my sleeve. Martha, are you done? I want to kill you with my bare hands. Todd grabbed my lapels. How do you even stand upright, Jack? You should be on your knees. Begging her. I looked at him. Let go. You threatening me? There are bailiffs right through those doors. I said no emotion at all. You throw a punch. I press charges. Assault's a felony. Todd, you're a smart guy. Do the math. His fist stopped in the air. Robert pulled him back and turned on me. Jack, for the sake of the man I thought you were. I'll ask one more time. Why did you cover for Richard Dalton? How much did he pay you? I looked past them out through the glass doors. A black SUV sat at the curb window, half down. There's nothing to explain. You. Martha came at me again, slapping and kicking. The rest of the family swarmed and screaming. Someone threw a cup of cold coffee. It hit my hair and face. I stood there and let them shove me around. The blood and the coffee soaked into my white shirt, turning it rust brown. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't take it out. Not yet. Then a voice cut through the noise. Excuse me. Make way. Press. A woman in jeans pushed to the front with a phone on a gimbal, aiming it at my face. Kelly, Metro True Crime. Sir, people online are saying you just committed perjury to protect your wife's rapist. Is that true? The live chat on her screen was scrolling too fast to read. Jessica shoved her face into frame. It's true. He's the monster husband. His wife was assaulted. He did nothing. And then he testified for the guy who did it. Camera swung to her, and she ate it up. My cousin's done nothing but suffer since she married him. She keeps the house, raised their kid, works full-time, and he sells her out. The comments exploded. Die trash, dox him, waste of oxygen. The camera came back to me. Sir, any statement? I looked at her for a long moment. Then I turned and walked down the steps. He's running. Guilty, Jessica shrieked. Robert grabbed my shoulder. You're not going anywhere. I stopped. My phone buzzed again. I looked down, still tracking the ping. Give me 2 more hours. I locked the screen and put it away. When I looked up, my face was stone. Fine, we'll do it here. What do you want to hear? Martha pointed a shaking finger at me. Tell everyone the truth. How much blood money did Richard give you? I answered that on the stand. I said I didn't take a dime. I told the truth. That night Isabel wanted it. She started it. The crowd surged at me. Then the courthouse doors opened. Richard Dalton walked out, custom suit, perfect tie, wearing the easy smirk of a man who just bought an acquittal. He stopped when he saw the mob. Robert broke from the crowd and ran at him. Dalton, you animal, look at me. I moved 2 steps, and I was between them. Robert This is federal property. What are you doing? Get out of my way. Can't do that, Jack. Robert's voice broke. You're still protecting him, the court ruled. I said it like a weather report. He's innocent. You put hands on an innocent man. That's aggravated assault. Martha came at us like she'd lost her mind. I don't care what the court says. He destroyed my daughter. You destroyed my daughter. I hope you both burn. I held out my arms and kept her back. Richard stood behind me. He didn't even flinch. He pulled out a lighter, lit a cigarette. Took a slow drag. Go to the car, Rich, I said, not looking back. It's on the left. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. I could hear the smile in his voice. Jack, you're a real one. Dinner's on me next week. He walked around the screaming family and headed for the SUV. Right before he opened the door, he looked back. The smile was gone. What replaced it was pity. You're a good guy, Jack. Shame you married a slut and had to clean up her mess. He got in. The door slammed, the tires squealed, and he was gone. Every bit of the crowd's rage swung back to me. Jack, you just let him leave. Isabel's voice cut through. She was leaning on Jessica, like her bones had turned to glass. Are you even human? I turned and faced her. Her face was streaked with tears. Her eyes bloodshot with hate. Isabel, I told you this ends today. Ends today, her voice cracked. He destroyed my body, my reputation, my life, and you say it ends today. The judge ruled. He ruled that way because you lied under oath. She stumbled toward me and Jessica yanked her back. Why did you say those things? Why did you say, I wanted it? You heard me. You were right there. I didn't answer. Somebody yelled from the crowd, he's here, her brother's here. A pickup slammed to a stop at the curb. Mark jumped out, left the door hanging open, and sprinted up the steps. Jack, before I could react, his boot hit me in the stomach. I folded in half and went down on my knees. He grabbed my shirt and hauled me up. How the hell do you dare show your face? He was close enough that I could smell the adrenaline on him. His eyes were wild. What did I tell you the day I gave you my baby sister? I said if you ever hurt her, I'd break your legs. He slammed me back down on the concrete, then dragged me up by the collar. Again, 3 years. My sister gave you 3 years. Do you have any idea what she gave up for you? I stayed on the ground. Not because I couldn't get up, because I didn't want to. My phone buzzed. Against my leg, I tilted my head and read the lock screen. Location locked. En route ETA 1 hour 40 minutes. I shut my eyes. 90 more minutes. Just survive 90 more minutes. Do you people even know what else he did? Isabel's voice had changed. The screaming was gone. What was left was empty. Everyone went quiet and turned to look at her. She stood in the middle of them, shaking, lips trembling. Our daughter. Sophie. We lost Sophie in March. Martha made a choking sound. What, Sophie? What happened to my grandbaby? Isabel covered her face and sobbed. You told us Jack's mother took her. Martha grabbed her shoulders. Tell me what happened. Isabel lifted her head. Her wet face locked onto mine. Because of him, he was gambling. He owed 60 grand to loan sharks. They came to the house. It was just me and Sophie. They wanted the money. I told them we didn't have it, and they. Her voice broke apart. They shoved Sophie. Her head hit the corner of the coffee table. By the time the ambulance got there, she was gone. Martha's legs gave out. She hit the concrete. My grandbaby, my sweet Sophie. Robert's face went gray. Why didn't you call us? Why didn't you tell me? Isabel shook her head. I couldn't do that to you, and I was scared they'd come after you too. They said if I went to the cops, they'd kill the whole family. So I swallowed it. I carried it by myself. And him. She pointed at me, her hand shaking. He's still gambling, still running up debt. My daughter's life wasn't enough. The bystanders were pressing in now, phones out, red lights blinking everywhere. This guy got his own kid killed and then covered for a rapist. I stayed on my knees and listened to all of it. I didn't defend myself. Once Robert walked over to me slowly. His voice sounded like gravel. Jack, is it true? I looked up at him. Trust your daughter. That's all I said. Then I lowered my head and checked my watch. Checking the time. Mark stomped his boot down on my wrist and pinned it to the ground. Got somewhere to be casino brothel. Pain shot up my arm. I swallowed the sound. I'll count to 3, Mark said, leaning over me. Then you tell the truth. Did you get Sophie killed? I said nothing. 1, nothing. 2, he pressed harder. I felt the bone grind. I forced my head up. None of your damn business. 3, he kicked me in the ribs. I rolled onto my side, curled up, no air in my lungs. Slowly, I pushed myself into a sitting position. Isabel was screaming from the side. Mark, stop hitting him. You're defending him. Mark turned on her. Izzy, open your eyes. He got Sophie killed. He handed you to Richard Dalton, and you're begging for his life. She shook her head, tears flying. I'm not begging for him. I'm protecting you. If you put him in the hospital, you go to prison, then I go to prison. Mark spun back and hauled me up by the shirt. For my sister and my niece I'll do the time happily. The crowd was a mob now. People were yelling, give him what he deserves. The vlogger stream was past 10,000 viewers. The chat wanted me dead. Mark slammed me into the stone wall of the courthouse. Last chance. Did you kill Sophie? I let 3 seconds go by, then I opened my mouth. Yes. One word. Martha fainted. Robert caught her tears running down his face. My baby, my little girl. I leaned against the cold stone and watched it all fall apart. The taste of blood filled my mouth. I swallowed it. Monster psychopath. Burn in hell. The curses came from every direction. The bystanders weren't just watching anymore. A middle-aged man in a track jacket stepped up and shoved my shoulder hard. I've got a 3-year-old at home. You don't deserve to breathe. Stumble. My back hit the sharp edge of a concrete planter. Pain shot up my spine. I pushed myself upright. Mark came at me again, with his fists up. Isabel threw her arms around him and pulled. Mark, enough. Why? Is it enough? He roared, trying to shake her off. He killed Sophie. He let you get raped. He deserves to be gutted. I raised a hand and slowly wiped the blood off my mouth. I looked at all of them, every single one, and then I smiled. Are you done talking? The smile through them, the shouting faltered. Because if you're done, it's my turn. I pushed off the planter and stood up to my full height. Does anybody here know what Isabel was wearing that night? The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of city traffic and the wet, ragged breathing of the crowd. Isabel stared at me through swollen, mascara-smudged eyes. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. It was her cousin, Jessica, who broke the quiet, her voice dripping with venom. What the hell does her dress have to do with you being a coward, Jack? The emerald green silk, Isabel whispered, her voice barely a thread. I wore the emerald green silk. You bought it for me. Emerald silk, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the agony screaming through my cracked ribs. I took a slow, shallow breath, tasting copper, custom-tailored, 100% organic weave. No synthetic fibers. Do you remember what Richard's defense attorney argued on the stand today, Izzy? Isabel flinched at the nickname, a spasm of pain crossing her face. He said I wore a dress with an easy release zipper. He said I chose it because it was easy to slip off. And the judge accepted it as part of the narrative of consent, I said. I looked at the vlogger, Kelly Metro, whose phone camera was still pointed directly at my bloody face. The live viewer count in the corner of her screen was climbing past 20,000 now. Good. Let them watch. But there's something Richard's high-priced lawyers didn't tell the court. They didn't know it. 3 months ago, when Sophie went missing, I knew our house was being watched. I knew my phone was tapped. I knew my business partner was systematically stripping me of my shares, my money, and my life. So I started preparing. Robert, her father, stepped forward, his fists still clenched, but the homicidal fury in his eyes was beginning to warp into confusion. Preparing. For what, Jack? You let him rape her. If I had opened that door, I said, looking Robert dead in the eye, we would both be dead, and we would have buried Isabel in an empty casket. Richard didn't just have a security guard outside that private room, Robert. He had a man named Victor standing in the kitchen corridor with a suppressed FN-57 pointed at my spine. I saw the red on my chest through the glass reflection of the hallway vending machine. If I made a sound, if I turned the handle, Victor was ordered to clear the room. Both of us. Isabel shook her head, her hands flying to her ears. No, you're lying. You're making this up to save your own skin. I didn't open the door because I had to keep you alive, I said, my voice dropping an octave, steady as stone. And I had to get that dress into police evidence. I looked down at Isabel. The emerald dress wasn't just silk, Izzy. 2 weeks before the dinner, I had a friend of mine, a defense contractor who specializes in smart textile surveillance, weave a microscopic, high-frequency audio transmitter into the interior lining of the collar. It doesn't use cellular bands. It uses a closed-loop military frequency that records locally to a flash chip embedded in the heavy brass zipper. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The defense team demanded the dress be entered into evidence to prove the zipper was undamaged and easily operated. I continued, a cold smile tugging at the corner of my bleeding mouth. They thought they were proving consent. In reality, they took the black box of Richard Dalton's entire criminal operation and locked it safely inside a federal evidence vault where his corrupt friends in the local precinct couldn't touch it, destroy it, or wipe it. What are you saying? Mark demanded, his grip on my collar loosening just a fraction, though his eyes remained wild. What's on that recording? Everything, I said, including the part where Richard pinned Isabel to the table, and while she was screaming, he leaned down and whispered into her ear. Tell Jack if he doesn't sign over the logistics terminal by Monday, his little girl in the basement gets put to sleep. Isabel's breath caught. She froze, her entire body locking up as the memory, the dark, horrific truth she had been forced to carry under threat of her family's execution, was laid bare in front of a live audience of 25,000 people. You. Isabel steeled herself, her voice cracking. You knew? You knew he had her. Of course I knew, I said softly. They didn't push Sophie into a coffee table. Izzy. That was the story they forced you to tell your family, so you wouldn't go to the police. They staged her death, but they never showed you a body. They gave you a sealed urn and told you if you demanded an autopsy, they'd send the rest of us to join her. I bought the story. I played the grieving, broken husband. I played the gambling addict. I let them think I was drowning in debt, so Richard would think I was weak, predictable, and easily controlled. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen lit up. Location locked. ETA 1 hour, 15 minutes. I needed him to walk today, I said, addressing the camera, the crowd, and the shattered family standing before me. If Richard Dalton was convicted today, his offshore accounts would have been frozen instantly by the federal prosecutor. The moment those accounts froze, the mercenaries holding Sophie at his private compound in the Appalachians would have stopped receiving their daily wire transfers. Do you know what hired guns do when the payroll stops and their boss is going to federal prison? The crowd went dead silent. The vlogger, Kelly, was staring at me with her mouth open, the gimbal shaking slightly in her hand. They clean up the evidence, I said. They kill the hostages. They burn the facility. They disappear. My God, Martha whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. She looked at her husband, Robert, then back at me. Jack. Sophie. Sophie is alive. She is, I said, my eyes burning with a sudden, fierce heat that I had kept buried deep in my chest for 90 agonizing days. For 3 months I have lived in a hell none of you could possibly conceive. I sat in a courtroom and called my wife a liar. I watched her look at me with nothing but hatred. I let her brother break my ribs, and I let you spit in my face. I did it because every single word I said on that stand was monitored by Richard's lawyers, who were feeding live updates to the guards at the compound. If I had faltered, if I had shown even a shred of defiance, the execution order would have been sent to the mountains. I took a step toward Isabel. She didn't shrink back this time. Her eyes were wide, filled with a dizzying mix of horror, hope, and overwhelming guilt. The trial is over, I said, my voice finally trembling, the raw emotion breaking through the stoic facade I had worn like armor. Richard walked. He thinks he won. He thinks he's invincible. Right now, he's in the back of that black SUV, heading straight to his private retreat in the mountains to celebrate. And he's carrying a highly active, military-grade GPS beacon that I personally slipped into the silk lining of his custom suit jacket when I congratulated him on his acquittal outside. I held up my phone, showing the screen to the vlogger's camera. A blinking red dot was moving rapidly along Interstate 81, heading north. Below it, a secondary blue icon was moving even faster, converging from the east. That blue icon, I said, is a joint task force of the FBI's hostage rescue team and the state police. They've been waiting for Dalton to lead them directly to the black site compound. They couldn't raid it before because Dalton kept the location rotating, but now he's heading there to oversee the disposal of his assets before he flees the country. Jack. Isabel stumbled forward, her knees buckling. I caught her before she hit the concrete, pulling her against my chest. Her hands grabbed my blood and coffee-stained shirt, her tears soaking into the fabric. Jack, oh my God. Jack, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't, I whispered, resting my chin on her head, ignoring the sharp pain in my ribs. Don't apologize. You did what you had to do to protect them. I did what I had to do to bring our daughter home. Mark stepped forward, his face pale, his hands shaking. He looked down at his boots, then up at me, his eyes thick with tears. Jack, I broke your wrist. I kicked you. We have 70 minutes, Mark, I interrupted, my voice turning sharp and clinical again. If you want to make it up to me, get your truck. We're going to the coordination point. I'll drive, Mark said instantly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. Let's go. God damn it, let's go. The ride northwest was a silent, tense blur of roaring engine noise and the rhythmic clicking of my phone's GPS tracker. Mark drove his pickup like a man possessed, weaving through highway traffic with a desperate, white-knuckled focus. I sat in the passenger seat, nursing my swollen wrist with a cold bottle of water Mark had thrown at me from his cooler. Isabel was in the back seat, her hand reaching between the headrests to grip my shoulder. She hadn't let go of me since we left the courthouse steps. Every few minutes, her grip would tighten, as if she needed to constantly remind herself that I was real, that I hadn't abandoned her, and that our daughter wasn't a memory buried under a fake grave marker. He's slowing down, I muttered, staring at the screen. The red representing Dalton's SUV had turned off the main interstate, transitioning onto a winding secondary road that snaked deep into the dense, forested ridges of the George Washington National Forest. That's the access road to his timber tract, Robert said from the jump seat in the back, his voice low and gravelly. He had insisted on coming, refusing to let his son and son-in-law go into the mountains alone. He bought 400 acres up there 5 years ago, said it was for a hunting lodge. I always knew it was a fortress. High fences, security gates, private guards. The FBI has the airspace monitored, I said, checking the tactical feed my military contact was forwarding to my encrypted app. They have 2 Blackhawks, running dark, flying low through the valleys to avoid radar detection. The moment Dalton clears the main gate, they're initiating the breach. What if they're too late? Isabel's voice was a fragile whisper. Jack, what if Richard realizes he's being tracked? What if he tries to use her as a shield? He doesn't know he's being tracked, I said, trying to sound more confident. Then I felt my heart was hammering against my bruised ribs like a trapped bird. The beacon in his jacket is passive. It only transpons when queried by a high-altitude satellite array. He won't detect a thing. To him, this is the victory lap. He thinks he humiliated us, broke our spirits, and won the company. And the dress? Robert asked. How does the recording get out? The moment the trial ended, a secure server automatically compiled the audio files from the zipper receiver and forwarded them to the Department of Justice, the federal prosecutor's office, and 3 major national news outlets. I explained. By now, the warrant for Dalton's arrest on federal kidnapping, human trafficking, and extortion charges has already been signed by a federal judge. The local police who took his bribes can't help him now. The feds are running the show. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a direct satellite call. The caller ID was a string of zeros. I swiped to answer, putting it on speaker. Collins here. Jack, this is Miller. A gruff, commanding voice came through the static-heavy line. It was Major Miller, my old commanding officer from my days in the Intelligence Corps, now a liaison for the FBI's tactical operations. We've got eyes on the target. Dalton's SUV just cleared his outer perimeter gate. The compound is heavily guarded, at least 8 armed sentries, ex-military contractors. They're carrying automatic weapons. Isabel gasped, her grip on my shoulder tightening to the point of pain. What's the status of the asset, Miller? I asked, my voice dropping into a cold, professional register I hadn't used in years. Do you have eyes on Sophie? Thermal imaging from the drone shows 3 heat signatures in the reinforced basement structure beneath the main lodge, Miller replied. One of them matches the height and weight profile of a 6-year-old child. She's moving, Jack. She's alive. Tears spilled over Isabel's cheeks. She let out a choked, sobbing laugh, burying her face in her hands. We are 60 seconds from the drop, Miller continued. The Blackhawks are turning hot. We're going to fast rope in and take the perimeter. Jack, you are to stay at the staging area. Do not enter the hot zone. Do you copy? Copy that, Miller, I said. We're 5 miles out. Keep her safe. Understood. Out. The line went dead. Mark pressed his foot harder on the gas, the truck's engine roaring as we hit the steep, unpaved incline of the mountain road. The staging area was a clearing by an abandoned forestry service station about 2 miles down the ridge from Dalton's compound. When we arrived, the area was already crawling with federal vehicles, dark blue Suburbans, tactical command trucks, and heavily armed agents in olive-drab body armor were moving with practiced, silent efficiency. As soon as Mark slammed the truck into park, I threw the door open and stepped
Out.
The mountain air was cold and crisp, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of the courtroom. An agent in tactical gear intercepted us immediately. Jack Collins? I'm special. Agent Vance. Your contact, Major Miller, told us to expect you. You and your family need to stay behind the perimeter line. Is there a live feed? I asked, my eyes scanning the tactical command vehicle, parked in the center of the clearing. I need to see. Vance hesitated, looking at my bruised face, my torn, blood-stained shirt, and the desperate, hollow eyes of Isabel standing behind me. He sighed, gesturing toward the back of the command van.
Come with me.
But stay out of the operator's way. We crowded into the back of the tech-filled truck. 2 analysts were seated in front of a bank of high-definition monitors. One screen showed a live thermal feed from an overhead drone, displaying the sprawling mountain lodge in shades of white, gray, and black. Glowing white figures, the guards, were scattered around the perimeter. Suddenly, 2 dark silhouettes, the Black Hawk helicopters, swept into the frame, hovering low over the lodge's clearing. Breaching, 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 a voice crackled over the radio. On the screen, tiny white figures dropped from the helicopters on fast ropes, hitting the ground in perfect coordination. The thermal feed flared with bright, sudden bursts of white light, flashbangs. Sentry down. Sentry down. We have visual on the main entrance. Breaching the front door. The tactical team moved like a single, devastating machine. The guards on the perimeter were neutralized almost instantly, caught completely off guard by the sudden, overwhelming federal assault. On the screen, we watched the white figures of the SWAT team swarm into the main building. Target secured. Dalton is down, the radio blared. Repeat, Dalton is in custody. No shots fired on the primary target. What about Sophie? Isabel cried out, leaning over the analyst's shoulder.
Where is she?
Where is my baby? Team 2, status on the basement. Agent Vance barked into his headset. Do you have the child? There was an agonizing 5-second stretch of static. My heart stopped beating. I held my breath, my hand finding Isabel's in the dark of the van. Then, the radio crackled back to life. This is Team 2 leader. We have the asset. Repeat, we have Sophie Collins.
She
is unharmed, physically intact, slightly dehydrated, but conscious and alert.
We
are bringing her up now. The tension in the van shattered like glass. Isabel collapsed onto the floor of the truck, sobbing hysterically, her face pressed against my knees. Robert slumped against the metal wall, his hand over his heart, tears streaming down his rugged, weathered face. Mark let out a loud, triumphant shout, punching the padded wall of the van. I closed my eyes, a single tear cutting a clean path through the dried blood and coffee on my cheek. We got her. 10 minutes later, a tactical transport vehicle pulled into the staging area. The rear door swung open, and an EMT stepped out, holding a small, blanket-wrapped bundle in his arms. Sophie. Isabel screamed, lunging forward. The little girl, pale, with her dark hair tangled and her eyes wide with bewilderment, looked around the chaotic clearing. The moment she saw her mother, her face crumpled, and she reached out her tiny arms. Mommy. Isabel snatched her from the EMT, wrapping her arms around her so tightly it looked as if she wanted to pull the child back inside her own body.
She rocked
back and forth on the damp grass, weeping, kissing her daughter's cheeks, her hair, her hands. My baby, my sweet girl. I'm here, Mommy's here, Isabel sobbed. I'm never letting you go again. Never. Robert and Mark crowded around them, a wall of protective, weeping family.
I
stood a few feet back, my hands resting in my pockets, watching them. The weight of the last 3 months, the sleepless nights, the crushing isolation, the absolute, agonizing certainty that I would be hated by everyone I loved if I failed, finally lifted off my shoulders, leaving me feeling hollowed out, but
light.
A shadow fell over me. I looked up to see Richard Dalton being led out of the back of a tactical vehicle, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back. His custom suit was torn and covered in dirt, his perfect hair disheveled. 2 federal agents were escorting him toward a transport van. When he saw me, he stopped. The easy, arrogant smirk was entirely gone, replaced by a raw, vicious hatred that twisted his features into something monstrous. You, Dalton spat, his voice shaking with rage. You set me up. You broke our agreement, Jack. I'll ruin you. I'll have my people cut you to pieces. You don't have any people left, Richard. I said, my voice quiet completely.
Come.
I stepped closer to him, ignoring the agents who instinctively moved too.
Keep us apart.
The FBI raided your shell companies in Delaware and the Cayman Islands 20 minutes ago. Every dollar you have has been frozen under the RICO
Act.
Your security team is in custody, and they're already talking to save themselves from a lifetime in a federal penitentiary. Dalton glared at me, his chest heaving. You played the coward. You let me walk.
Why?
Why didn't you just let the cops handle it? Because the local cops were yours, I said. And because I needed you to feel
Safe.
I needed you to walk out of that courthouse, get into your car, and drive straight to the one place you thought was secure. You led us right to her. Richard, you did the work for us. I leaned in, so close he could see the blood still dripping from my brow. And, as for the trial, I didn't lie on the stand, Richard. I told the court that Isabel took off her own dress and climbed into your lap. And she did.
But I
Didn't tell them why. Dalton's eyes widened in sudden, horrifying realization. She did it because you had a gun to her head, I whispered. And she did it because she had a recording device in her zipper. Every word you said, every threat, every boast, every admission of what you did to my daughter is now on a federal server. You didn't buy an acquittal, Richard. You bought a one-way ticket to ADX Florence. The agents pulled him away, throwing him into the back of the armored van.
The
Heavy steel doors slammed shut, cutting off his furious, muffled screams. 2 hours later, the clearing had mostly emptied out. The tactical teams had departed, leaving only a few state police cruisers to secure the perimeter. Sophie had fallen asleep in the back of Mark's truck, wrapped in 3 layers of heavy blankets, her head resting in her grandfather's lap. Robert was stroking her hair, his eyes fixed on her face, as if he feared she might vanish if he looked away. Isabel walked over to where I was sitting on the bumper of a police cruiser, a medic finally wrapping a bandage around my split eyebrow and taping my cracked
ribs.
He says you have a hairline fracture in your wrist, Isabel said, her voice quiet. She looked down at my bandaged hand. And 3 cracked ribs. I've had worse, I said, offering a weak smile. It's fine, Izzy. She stood in front of me, her shoulders trembling. The tough, angry woman who had thrown a steel tumbler at my head was gone. In her place was the woman I loved, completely laid bare, carrying a grief and a relief too heavy for her to bear alone. How did you do it? She whispered, tears pooling in her eyes again. How did you stand there? How did you let me hate you? How did you let them beat you, spit on you, and not say a word? Because none of it mattered, I said, reaching out with my uninjured hand to cup her cheek, wiping away a stray tear with my thumb. The only thing that mattered was keeping you alive and bringing Sophie home. If the cost of that was my reputation, my dignity, or my life, I would pay it 1,000 times over. Isabel let out a broken sob and threw her arms around my neck, burying her face in the crook of my shoulder. I held her tight, ignoring the sharp, stabbing pain in my chest, letting the warmth of her body anchor me back to the world. I called you a monster, she cried into my neck. I told you I hated you.
I
Through that glass. I hurt you. You were protecting our daughter, I whispered, kissing the top of her head. And you thought I had betrayed her. You did exactly what a mother is supposed
to do. I don't blame you, Izzy.
I never did. Mark walked over, his head down, looking thoroughly humbled. He stopped a few feet away, clearing his throat awkwardly. Jack, Mark said, his voice thick.
I don't even know what to say. I'm a
goddamn idiot. I should have trusted you. I should have known you'd never. Forget it, Mark, I said, looking up at him. You were defending your sister. Just next time, don't aim for the ribs. I'm getting too old for this. A faint, emotional laugh broke through the family's exhaustion. Mark nodded, reaching out to shake my uninjured hand, his grip tight and full of a silent, deep respect. Let's get her home, Robert said from the truck, his voice soft but clear. Let's go home. 3 days later, the dust had finally begun to settle. The story had exploded nationwide. The live stream by Kelly Metro had gone viral, drawing millions of viewers and forcing the federal government to release the transcripts of the wiretap dress recording to the public. The narrative of the coward husband had been completely erased, replaced by headlines detailing the desperate, high-stakes gamble of a father who had sacrificed everything to save his family. Our house, which had been surrounded by angry protesters just days ago, was now
quiet.
The police had set up a security detail at the end of the driveway to keep the media at bay, allowing us the privacy we so desperately needed. I sat on the back porch, watching the late afternoon sun filter through the
trees.
My ribs were still tightly wrapped, and my wrist was in a removable splint, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the deep, overwhelming peace that had settled over the property. From inside, I heard the sound of giggling, a light, musical sound that I hadn't heard in 3 long, agonizing months. Sophie was in the kitchen, helping her mother bake cookies, her small hands covered in flour. The screen door creaked open, and Isabel stepped out onto the porch, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She had washed her hair, and the swelling around her eyes had gone down, revealing the bright, beautiful blue I had fallen in love with years ago. She handed me a mug, then sat down on the wooden bench beside me, leaning her head against my shoulder. She asked if we can go to the park tomorrow, Isabel said softly, her eyes tracing the golden light on the lawn. She wants to slide on the big blue slide. We can go, I said, taking a sip of the warm coffee. We can go anywhere she wants. Isabel was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing the bandage on my
wrist.
The lawyers called today. They said Dalton's legal team is trying to negotiate a plea deal. They're offering to disclose the names of all the corrupt city officials and police officers he had on his payroll in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table. Let them, I said, my voice cold. As long as he never sees the light of day again, I don't care what deal he makes. He's finished. Isabel turned her head to look at me, her eyes soft, filled with a deep, quiet warmth. And what about us, Jack? What do we do now? I set my coffee mug down, turning to face her. I took her hand in mine, feeling the gentle, reassuring warmth of her skin. We rebuild, I said. We heal. We raise our daughter. And we never, ever let anyone come between us again. Isabel smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time in what felt like an eternity. She leaned in, pressing her lips to mine, a sweet, lingering kiss that tasted of forgiveness, survival, and a future we had fought through hell to reclaim. From the kitchen, Sophie's voice called out, sweet and clear. Mommy, Daddy,
The
cookies are ready. I looked at Isabel, and for the first time in 3 months, the smile on my face was entirely real. Let's go eat some cookies, I said. We stood up together, hand in hand, and walked back inside, leaving the darkness of the past behind us, stepping into the warm, bright light of our home.